Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be posting here, but after what happened last month, I just needed to write it all out. Maybe someone can learn from this, or maybe I just need to get it off my chest. A little background. I'm a 35-year-old software engineer, married for 7 years to my wife, Priya. We met in grad school. Back then, I was the shy guy who barely spoke in class, and she was the one who always had ideas, big ones. She used to say, "If Sundar Pichai can go from a small town in India to leading Google, why can't we aim higher too?" She admired stories like his, how he stayed humble even after success. That's what I loved about her. Fast forward to now, I work remotely for a tech company, and she runs a small design firm. Things were good, or at least I thought they were. It started with small things, her being busy all the time, her phone never leaving her hand, and her staying up late after I'd gone to bed. I told myself it was just work stress, that she was hustling for her business. I didn't want to be that paranoid husband who checks on his wife's messages. But then, one evening, she asked me to help fix her laptop. It wasn't charging properly. She handed it to me, then went to take a shower. While I was checking the charger settings, an email notification popped up on the corner of the screen. It was from someone named Rohan Redheart, subject line. Last night felt different. My stomach dropped. I didn't even want to open it, but my hand moved before my brain caught up. The email wasn't long. It said, "I can't stop thinking about what you said, that you feel trapped but can't leave yet. I don't want to pressure you, but I meant it when I said I'd wait." I just sat there staring at the screen. It was like my body went numb. My wife, the woman who told me she believed in loyalty, in hard work, in building something together, was talking about feeling trapped to someone else. I didn't say anything when she came out of the shower. I just handed her the laptop and said it was fixed. But inside, something cracked that night. I barely slept. I just kept replaying every conversation, every little change in her tone. Every night, she stayed up late, working. And that's when I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I sat across from her at breakfast, watching her stir her coffee. I couldn't even taste my food. I just kept thinking about that email. I feel trapped, but can't leave yet. She looked up at me and smiled like nothing was wrong. That smile hurt more than anything else. I told myself I'd wait, that I'd collect more proof before jumping to conclusions. But by lunchtime, I couldn't stand it anymore. My chest felt heavy, my thoughts were spinning, and I just blurted it out. "Who's Rohan?" Her spoon froze midair. She blinked twice, trying to stay calm, but I could see her pulse jump at the base of her neck. "What?" she said, pretending she hadn't heard me. "I saw the email," I said quietly. "From him. Last night." Her face went pale, then red. "You were checking my emails?" she snapped, instantly on the defensive. I shook my head. "No, it popped up while I was fixing your laptop. I didn't mean to see it, but I did." There was silence, the kind that makes your stomach twist because it confirms everything you don't want to believe. "Finally," she said, "it's not what you think." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, more like disbelief trying to escape through my throat. "Then what is it, Priya? Because he said you feel trapped and can't leave yet. What does that mean?" She sighed, looked away, and said, "He's just someone from my client network. We've been talking about life, work, stress. He's going through a divorce." I might have said something that sounded wrong. It was such a weak answer that I almost pitted her for saying it. "Do you love him?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. That's when I realized something. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry that I found out. I stood up, told her I needed air, and walked out. I didn't even grab my phone or keys. I just walked until I ended up at a park bench. I sat there for hours, thinking about everything. The years we'd spent together, the sacrifices, the late nights, the dreams. All of it suddenly felt like someone else's life. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a friend's place, my old college buddy, Arjun. I didn't tell him the details at first, just said Priya and I had a fight. But he could tell something serious had happened. The next morning, after a night of zero sleep and too many thoughts, I texted her. Just 5 words. "We need to talk today." She agreed. We met in the living room, the same space where we used to have coffee together every morning. Now it felt like a courtroom. She looked exhausted, eyes red, like she'd been crying. For a split second, a part of me softened. Then she said, quietly, "You deserve to know everything." That's when she told me the truth. Rohan wasn't a client. He was someone she met at a startup event in Mumbai 8 months ago. They'd kept in touch afterward, first professionally, then personally. She said it started as emotional support, that he understood her ambition in ways I didn't anymore. I asked, "Did you sleep with him?" Her silence lasted long enough that I already had my answer. When she finally whispered, "Yes," I swear the air left my lungs. She said it only happened twice, that it was a mistake, that she didn't even feel anything during it. But every word felt like a nail being hammered into something I once called my marriage. I remember staring at the floor, just trying to process it all. The woman who used to quote Sundar Pichai about staying humble, staying kind, building something together, had been building something else behind my back. The worst part? She said she'd been planning to tell me, but couldn't find the right time. I told her there's no right time to confess betrayal. There's just honesty, and she'd already skipped that part months ago. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just said, "We're done." She cried, begged me to reconsider, said she'd end it with him immediately, that she still loved me. But I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not hate, just emptiness. After that conversation, I went silent for days. I stayed at Arjun's apartment, barely spoke to anyone, and just sat there scrolling through old photos on my phone. I wasn't trying to torture myself. I just wanted to remember what it used to be like. The road trips, the nights we stayed up planning our future, the way she used to surprise me with little notes saying, "One day, we'll build something huge together." But all of that felt hollow now. Arjun tried to keep me sane. One night, he said, "Bro, you can either spend months asking why, or you can start asking what now." That hit me hard. I realized I'd been holding on to the idea of Priya, the woman I fell in love with, not the one who existed now. And as much as it killed me to admit it, the person she'd become wasn't someone I could trust again. 3 days later, I called her and said I wanted a divorce. She broke down over the phone. She said she'd quit her job, block Rohan, do therapy, anything to save us. But I told her something I didn't even know I believed until that moment. Love can survive mistakes, but not lies. She came over once to pick up some things. We didn't fight. We just existed in silence. I watched her look around our apartment like she was saying goodbye to a version of herself too. When she left, I felt both broken and free. I filed for divorce the next week. My hands were shaking when I signed the papers, but deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. That night, I went on YouTube trying to distract myself, and somehow ended up watching a speech by Sundar Pichai, the same man she once admired. He talked about resilience, about not letting what happens to you define you, but letting it refine you. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening, and thought, maybe this was my refining moment. The morning after filing the papers, I woke up early, earlier than I had in months. There was this weird stillness in the apartment. Her clothes were gone. Her perfume wasn't in the air anymore. Even the toothbrush holder looked emptier. But instead of breaking down, I just stood there and breathed. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. I decided I needed to move, to do something with my hands, my time, my mind, anything but sit there drowning in memories. So, I did something small. I went for a walk, just around the block. No music, no phone, just me. And I noticed things I hadn't in years. The sound of the newspaper guy's bike, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the old man feeding pigeons near the corner. I realized how disconnected I'd been from life itself while I was trying to fix a marriage that was already gone. Later that week, I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. Every day, I'd write 3 things I was grateful for, even if it was something stupid like coffee was good today. And little by little, I started feeling human again. My company offered me a chance to relocate to Singapore for a 6-month project. Normally, I'd have said no. Too far, too complicated, too much change. But this time I said yes. It felt symbolic. A new country, A new environment, a new version of me. Before I left, Priya called me one last time. She said she was in therapy and that she hoped someday I could forgive her. I told her I already had. Not because I wanted her back, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of hate anymore. And that was it. No grand closure, no dramatic goodbye. Just two people finally letting go. When I got on that plane to Singapore, I remember looking out the window and thinking, maybe life isn't about what breaks you. It's about what you do after. Singapore was supposed to be just work, new city, new project, clear head. That was the plan. I wasn't looking for anything emotional, spiritual, or remotely connected to my past. But life has a funny way of handing you surprises exactly when you stop expecting them. My first few weeks were routine: work, gym, sleep, repeat. I lived in a small apartment near Clark Quay, surrounded by a mix of expats and locals. It was quiet, clean, and anonymous, exactly what I needed. Then, one rainy evening, I was sitting at a cafe finishing up some emails when a woman came in, drenched but smiling. She asked if she could share my table since all the others were taken. I nodded. Her name was Asha, a data analyst from Bangalore who'd moved to Singapore a year earlier. She was smart, funny, and, most importantly, real. No fake smiles, no carefully curated stories. Just honesty. We started talking about work, cities we missed, our favorite street food, even about heartbreak. I didn't tell her everything about Priya, just that my marriage had ended recently. She didn't pry, just nodded and said, "Sometimes we outgrow people, and that's okay." That line stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, we bumped into each other again, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes not. We'd grab coffee, go for walks, and talk about everything from technology to philosophy. I found myself laughing again, really laughing, something I hadn't done since before everything fell apart. But here's where it got strange. One evening, while we were talking about career inspirations, she mentioned that her role model was also Sundar Pichai. She said, "What I love most is that he never burned bridges on his way up. He just kept moving forward quietly." I froze for a second. It was eerie, that same name, the same philosophy Priya once admired. But this time, it didn't sting. It felt poetic, like life was bringing me full circle, reminding me that not everyone who quotes inspiration lives a lie. Some actually live by it. That night, walking back to my apartment under the streetlights, I realized I wasn't scared of trusting again. I wasn't healed completely, but I was healing. It had been 3 months in Singapore. I was finally starting to feel like myself again, or maybe a better version of myself. Work was going great. I was exercising, eating right, and Asha had become a close friend. Not a replacement for what I lost, but a reminder that not all connections are meant to hurt. Then one morning, I got an email from Priya. Subject line: "Just wanted to talk." My stomach tightened, just like the first time I saw that email from Rohan. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me open it. She said she'd been doing therapy, had dissolved her company, and was moving to Chennai to stay closer to family. She apologized again for everything and wrote, "I hope someday we can talk without anger. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it." I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. The old me, the one from a few months ago, would have jumped to reply, maybe even comfort her. But the man sitting there now was different. I realized something powerful. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It just means freedom. So I wrote back one simple line: "I wish you peace, Priya. Take care." That was it. No blame, no nostalgia, no bitterness. I hit send and felt something lift off me, like I'd finally closed the door that had been half open for too long. Later that week, Asha and I went for dinner by the river. She noticed I seemed lighter and asked why. I told her, "I finally learned that letting go isn't losing, it's choosing yourself." She smiled and said, "That's the kind of wisdom people usually pay for in therapy." We both laughed. But deep down, I knew that was the moment I truly started living again. Little did I know, though, life wasn't done surprising me. Because just when I thought my story had settled, something unexpected happened at work. It was a Friday afternoon, one of those calm days where everyone in the office was already half mentally checked out for the weekend. I was cleaning up some code for a client project when my manager, Lucas stopped by my desk. He said, "You got a few minutes? Let's grab a coffee." Now, if you've ever worked in tech, you know that line can mean anything, from you're getting a raise to we're cutting your role. So I followed him, half anxious, half curious. We sat in the corner of the office cafe, and after a few polite pleasantries, he got straight to the point. "There's a new position opening up," he said. "It's a leadership role, managing a small cross-functional team that'll collaborate directly with Google Asia Pacific. We think you'd be perfect for it." For a second, I didn't process what he said. Google, the same company Priya used to talk about, the same company that once symbolized everything we dreamed of building together. It hit me like déjà vu, but in the best way. I asked him what the catch was, and he said, "You'd have to relocate to Mountain View for a year, maybe longer." I just sat there in silence, holding the coffee cup, thinking about everything. How I'd started this journey broken, empty, and convinced my life had hit a dead end. And now, the universe was handing me an opportunity connected to the very inspiration that once tied me and Priya together. Lucas must have noticed I was lost in thought because he said, "You don't have to decide today. Take the weekend." That night, I called Asha. We met at our usual cafe, and I told her about the offer. Her eyes widened. "That's huge," she said. "Are you going to take it?" I shrugged. "I wanna, but it feels strange. Like this circle keeps spinning back to where it all began, with Sundar Pichai and Google and all that ambition we once shared." She smiled softly. "Maybe that's not a circle. Maybe it's a spiral. You're revisiting the same place, just at a higher level now." That line stayed with me all night. I didn't sleep much, but when I finally did, I woke up knowing my answer. The next morning, I went for a long walk along the river. The city was waking up, people jogging, boats gliding across the water, sunlight breaking through the mist. I watched the reflections ripple on the surface and thought, maybe this is what moving on really looks like, clarity after chaos. By the time I reached home, I'd made my decision. I emailed Lucas and wrote, "I'm in. Let's do it." Just hitting send gave me chills. I wasn't saying yes just to a job. I was saying yes to life again. To risk. To growth. To something bigger than pain. Asha was the first person I told. She grinned from ear to ear and said, "I knew you would. You're not meant to play it safe. You're meant to lead." Her words reminded me of something Priya used to say back when we were still dreaming big. Comfort zones kill ambition. But instead of sadness, I felt gratitude, because even if that chapter ended in betrayal, it had still shaped who I became. I started preparing for the move to California. The company handled most of the logistics, visa, housing, relocation support. Still, it felt surreal packing my things again, like I was closing one lifetime to start another. The night before I left Singapore, Asha and I sat by the water one last time. We talked for hours about work, life, and how timing always seems to test people. She said, "Maybe the reason you had to go through all that pain wasn't to find someone new, but to find yourself again." I smiled. Then I guess it worked. She handed me a small gift, a notebook. On the first page, she'd written, "Keep building, not for someone else, but for yourself." That line hit harder than I expected. The next morning, I boarded the flight to California. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at the city that had healed me and whispered to myself, "This time, I'm writing the story, not reacting to it." Landing in California felt like stepping into another version of my life, brighter, quieter, and strangely peaceful. The air had that crisp West Coast clarity, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was running toward it. The Google Asia Pacific collaboration team was based out of Mountain View, and I was managing a mix of engineers and product designers from different time zones. The first few weeks were intense, long hours, endless calls, and pressure to prove myself. But I loved it. Every late night reminded me of the student I used to be, the one who believed hard work could change everything. One afternoon, while waiting for a meeting to start, I wandered around the campus. I passed by a framed quote on one of the walls that read, "Wear your failure as a badge of honor." Sundar Pichai? I stopped and stared at it. That line hit deep, because for the first time, I realized that's exactly what I had been doing. My failed marriage, my heartbreak, my loneliness, they weren't stains. They were proof that I had tried. That evening, I wrote in the notebook Asha gave me. Life doesn't reward avoidance. It rewards endurance. A few months later, I got invited to a leadership retreat for project heads. To my surprise, the keynote speaker was none other than Sundar Pichai himself. I sat in the front row, listening to him talk about resilience, humility, and the power of learning from personal setbacks. He said something I'll never forget. Don't be afraid of detours. Sometimes, the scenic route is where you discover who you are meant to be. I swear, for a second, it felt like he was talking directly to me. After his talk, I didn't try to take a photo or get an autograph. I just stood there, quietly grateful. Because somehow, his words had been a thread woven through my entire story, from the moment my life fell apart to this new chapter where I was finally at peace. That night, walking back to my apartment, I thought, maybe life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about growing strong enough to turn it into purpose. Life in California was settling into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Work was challenging in the best way. Asha and I had developed a comfortable friendship, and for the first time, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Then, one Thursday afternoon, the universe threw a curveball. I was walking through a local cafe near the office, grabbing a coffee, when I saw someone sitting at a corner table. My chest tightened instantly. It was Priya. Not in a run across the street, kind of shocked, but in a surreal, slow-motion moment that made my heart beat faster and slower at the same time. She looked exactly the same, but older, calmer, maybe humbler. I froze. She looked up, saw me, and her eyes widened. She waved, hesitated, then smiled nervously. For a second, I wanted to walk away. Run. Pretend I didn't see her. But curiosity, and some leftover compassion, made me approach her. We sat at opposite ends of the table. Silence hung thick in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Finally, she said, I didn't expect to see you here. I nodded. Neither did I. She took a deep breath. I just wanted to say I've been doing a lot of thinking. Therapy, moving back to India, trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to apologize again. I studied her face. She seemed genuine. No excuses. No pleading. Just honesty. I said, I forgive you. Truly. But I'm not the same person I was when we were together. Her shoulders relaxed. I hoped you'd say that. I hope you found peace. I smiled faintly. I have. And I'm building something new, something I own fully, my life. For the first time, there was no pain in seeing her. Just closure. A strange, comforting sense that the past had finally settled where it belonged, behind me. As I left the cafe, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes, it's the bridge that allows you to keep moving forward. After that encounter with Priya, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was like carrying a weight for a decade and suddenly realizing it had never truly been mine to bear. That evening, I met Asha at our favorite cafe. I wanted to share the experience, not because I needed validation, but because she had been my anchor through all this. She listened quietly as I recounted the encounter. When I finished, she just smiled. You're free now, she said softly. Not because of what you did, but because of who you've become. It struck me how much trust and honesty can rebuild a person. Asha had been there without judgment, without rushing me, just offering understanding and space. It made me realize how different love can feel when it's rooted in respect and patience. Over the next few weeks, our friendship slowly deepened. Nothing forced, nothing dramatic, just late-night walks, working on side projects together, sharing stories about our families. One day, she showed me a small prototype she'd been working on, a language learning app she was building. I offered some feedback, and we ended up collaborating on a few features. That collaboration brought a spark back into my life. Not the intense, consuming kind of early love, but a gentle, inspiring partnership. I began to understand that sometimes the right person doesn't rush into your life. They walk in quietly and make you feel alive again. It was a slow process, but I found joy in the little things, sharing a meal, debating ideas, even laughing at the silly mistakes we made while testing her app. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving life. I was genuinely excited to see where it would go. A few months into my new routine, I realized something profound. The lessons from my past weren't just about betrayal or heartbreak. They were about resilience, about understanding myself, and about learning how to trust again, both others and myself. I used to think that failure in a relationship was a permanent mark, like a scar that everyone could see. But what I learned is that it's more like a tattoo you can choose to turn into art. You can let it define you negatively, or you can let it remind you how strong you are. Asha once said during a late-night coffee session, "Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. It waits for courage." That line hit harder than anything Priya or even the emails ever did. I realized that moving on isn't just about leaving someone behind. It's about finding your own direction, building your own story, and honoring yourself in the process. Even in work, I started applying this mindset. When a project failed or a deadline slipped, I didn't panic or blame myself. I assessed, learned, adapted, just like I was learning to do with life. Looking back, the pain, the betrayal, the emptiness, all of it had taught me how to value honesty, empathy, and self-respect. I wouldn't trade those lessons for comfort. They shaped the man I was becoming. If I could go back to the moment I first saw that email from Rohan, I'd tell myself a few things I wish I'd known then. First, don't ignore the signs. I spent months rationalizing changes in her behavior, telling myself it was just stress. But deep down, I knew. Trust your instincts. Second, you can forgive without going back. Forgiving Priya didn't mean I had to stay, and forgiving myself for staying too long didn't erase the pain. It gave me the freedom to grow. Third, life is bigger than heartbreak. I used to think my life ended with her betrayal. But in reality, it opened doors I never would have explored, moving to Singapore, building a career in California, meeting someone like Asha. Fourth, invest in yourself. I rediscovered my passions, rebuilt routines, and remembered that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It comes from within. And finally, healing isn't linear. There were days I cried, days I laughed, days I questioned everything. And that's okay. It's part of the process. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about navigating it with courage. If nothing else, I tell my past self, your story isn't over. The next chapter can be better than you ever imagined, if you let it. Now, sitting in my apartment in California, looking out at the skyline during sunset, I often think about how far I've come. From the shock of betrayal to rebuilding my life in a new country, it's been a journey I never expected, and honestly, one I wouldn't trade. I've learned that pain is temporary, but growth is permanent. That life doesn't wait for us to be ready. It throws challenges, detours, and surprises, and it's up to us to keep moving. I still think about Priya sometimes, but not with anger or sadness, just with understanding and gratitude for the lessons she unintentionally taught me. I think about Rohan too, though barely. He was a footnote in my story, not the main chapter. And then there's Asha. She's become more than a friend. She's a reminder that trust, patience, and genuine connection exist, and that they can rebuild a heart that once felt broken beyond repair. If I had to sum it all up in one line, it would be this: life will break you, surprise you, and challenge you, but it will also refine you. Keep moving forward, keep building yourself, and never settle for less than honesty, respect, and true connection. To anyone going through heartbreak, betrayal, or loss, it will hurt. It will feel unbearable. But trust me, the story isn't over. Your next chapter can be the one where you finally meet the person you're meant to become, yourself. And sometimes, life's greatest teachers show up in the most unexpected ways. Through heartbreak, through distance, and yes, sometimes through a small email that changes everything.